guys, welcome back to Cyberspace Investigations. Don't worry, I'm prepared this time. Ever since the rainstorm, I've been figuring out the perfect way to take down Miyamoto. Let me introduce you to my sword. This bad boy's got all the features: a cutting edge, integrity, and the head of Christopher Columbus just sitting on the edge of a stick, ready to be impaled like the bastard he is. But how do I take down Miyamoto, really? The master of platformers, adventure games? He's practically done everything, and most of the games he's made have been really big successes. But honestly, nothing can emulate the real thing. So I'll just use you. Sword physics, EXP, different moves. But before we do that, let's see the way Nintendo handled their own take at an RPG. The NES era was a fun time for video games. Exploding onto the scene after the crash of '83, the NES led the charge with a plethora of very quality games, especially for the time. And unlike the Atari era, where sequels were almost never a thing because, well, games probably took 6 months to develop with one person, so why even make another game? Just continue on making a new concept. What did you have? Primary colored squares during that era. But with 8-bit systems, they were getting more complex, and concepts had to evolve, and so sequels were becoming more normalized. So when Nintendo's biggest games like Mario and Zelda, which were both critically acclaimed series, needed sequels, some changes were implemented. While Miyamoto was involved with the creation of both original games, the sequels were more hands-off. He had a child by then and wanted to spend more time on other things. Sequels were decided to be different from the original, something that definitely wouldn't stick, especially with Nintendo, but at the time the games had to be fairly different. In that mindset, the changes between Zelda 1 and 2 were created. Zelda 2 was to be a side-scrolling RPG with light platforming and far more action-based combat. Link's shield, instead of looking like a shield, looks like, well, a stick? I don't know, perspective is weird sometimes. Gone were the hard containers and simple shops. In their place, learning new combat moves, spells, and leveling up were the main activities. Of course, the story is still extremely simple, as this is just an 8-bit game, but is a little more mature than the first one. Link is now aged up, a little older, and traded away all of the items from the first game for being able to jump. Honestly, I wouldn't have traded that out. So Zelda, not the Zelda from the first game, her older sister, or mother, it's not really clear, who I guess has been asleep since before the first game, is now really asleep. And Link, who got the Triforce of Courage, has to go to some temples to stop Ganon's minions from resurrecting him. I like the idea of Ganon's minions resurrecting him. It was a good concept. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for the rest of the game. There's a reason you don't play early RPGs in their original English translations anymore. It's because they're terrible. Both Zelda games suffered from enormously detrimental translation errors that completely screwed up major hints that were supposed to help the player. Instead, it just led to more confusion and a worse play experience. Not much has changed in the 1 year since the first game's release. While I think there's a little less cryptic nonsense this time around, Zelda 2 has many more issues in the way of searing difficulty. Imagine you're playing the first game in a series. It's fun, has great gameplay, and isn't too hard if you know what you're doing. Then you move over to the second game in that series, and it's obtuse, annoying, and way too hard. You know what? I'm just gonna get into it. I hate how this game controls. Link's movement on the overworld is sluggish, and stepping off the main paths just cause immense problems. At least you can see the encounters coming, but there's very little you can actually do about that. Once you're thrown in, you've got to run to one side or the other to get out and continue moving forward to your next destination. In terms of jumping, Link can certainly do it. Doing so gives access to an extra sword attack, which is certainly useful for certain enemies. Spells are learned throughout the game to help with progression in combat, as well as health and magic upgrades given through level ups. None of these systems quite work well. I think most of my time in the game was spent getting caught in these encounters and dealing with some of the worst enemy designs in the series. None of that can come close to the bland nature of the dungeons, muddled and whittled down to a 2D side-scrolling slog compared to the original game's decent dungeon design. That, and the game isn't very good looking. Neither was the first game, but this one just kinda looks ugly by comparison. Can we take a moment to talk about the darkness areas? I hate them with a passion. Unknown enemies, invisible projectiles, barely being able to see where Link is, just the worst. The bosses are much less versatile than the first game, as they're restricted to a 2D plane only, and there's not much that can be done with that. There's one good fight in the game, though, Link's Shadow. Oh man, a duel. Certainly the only fight that's actually worth something in the game, a serious fight against an equal opponent. If you couldn't just cheese it immediately and win. Yeah, that's sad. All in all, I think Zelda II does have a little merit as a game of its time and an interesting stepping stone for the Zelda franchise. As something fun though? Yeah, no. Not unless you're interested in the historical value. Go play A Link to the Past or Link's Awakening or really any other Zelda game that's not on the Philips CDI. I don't think that was what I needed. Those caves were really dark. Guess we're just going off of you, old friend. That's right. Greatest game of all time, Sword Simulator 2021, unlike anything the world has ever seen. Damn it!